Latitude Media, covering the new frontiers of the energy transition.
From Latitude Media, this is Open Circuit. This week, we are wading into the heated discourse over Bill Gates' latest take on climate and tech innovation. His recent letter caused a wave of strong reactions, and so we figured, why not add some of our own? Why are we still stuck on the innovation versus deployment trope? Then we'll take a quick look at how climate tech and clean energy startups are navigating the current landscape. Investment is up, but the ground is shifting. We'll touch a bit on exit strategies and policy priorities. And finally, as we approach the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, we'll ask, what will history remember us for 250 years from now? That's all coming up in our live episode from Greentown Labs. Open Circuit is brought to you by Natural Power. For nearly 2 decades, Natural Power has provided engineering and consulting services for renewables projects across the U.S. Natural Power supports clients in wind, solar, and battery storage with a focus on independent engineering, technical due diligence, energy estimation, and developer support. With more than 245 gigawatts of project experience in North America and acceptance from major financiers, Natural Power is responsive, able to meet tight timelines, and pragmatic. Natural Power works with you to understand, quantify, and mitigate risks. Learn more at naturalpower.com or click the link in the show notes.
In the US, a billion-dollar disaster now strikes every 3 weeks on average. That's why Latitude Media and the Ad Hoc Group are launching the Power Resilience Forum, taking place January 21st through 23rd in Houston, Texas. PRF 2026 will be the center of the conversation on resilience. Utilities, regulators, innovators, and investors will all be in the room, talking about how to keep the grid running in this new era of heat waves, wildfires, and storms. Expect conversations on everything from AI-driven solutions to new financing models that can actually get projects built. If you work on the grid or depend on it, this is the place to be. Join us in Houston in January for the 2026 Power Resilience Forum. Check out the agenda and register at resilience-forum.com.
Hello, Somerville, Massachusetts. How's everybody doing? I am Stephen Lacey. I am the executive editor of Latitude Media, and I'm a New Englander. I was so excited about the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution. I tried to get Ken Burns here as my co-host, but he declined, so I'm stuck up here with these two.
Sorry. Seems super disappointing.
Those two are Catherine Hamilton and Jigar Shah. I have to say I'm so relieved. I was texting you incessantly, figuring that you might not get here, going through 2 very busy airports this morning during a government shutdown. So absolutely relieved that you're here.
Yeah, I was praying quite a bit this morning because of the air traffic control issue and the government shutdown. And Virginia being a hub of shutdown, I would say. Did you leave out a national?
I flew in from Chicago this morning, and I'm upset that the government, I think, is still shut down after 37 days. It's ridiculous.
Longest shutdown ever. Catherine Hamilton is the co-founder and the co-chair, or the chair, is the co-founder and chair of 38 North Solutions. She's a former board member of Greentown Labs. How are you?
Great. I love this place so much. Huge fan.
And Jigar Shah is the co-managing director of Multiplier. He is the former director of the DOE Loan Programs Office. Hello, Jigar.
Hello.
So I want to start with something that's in the news right now. Can I just get your reactions to this Tuesday's elections? We saw major races in Georgia, in Virginia, in New Jersey, all centered around electricity prices. So based on the results that you saw this Tuesday, how do you think electricity prices, energy is playing into the American public policy going forward? Catherine?
It's huge. It's massive. I mean, I'm in Virginia, and Virginia had a real sweep. A lot of seats switched over. And that was, affordability was a big issue. The other issue is the shutdown and DOGE, because 250,000 federal workers are in Virginia, and 10% of them got canned. So there was that, but affordability is everything. It really is, and you can see that throughout the races. Another race that I watched that was pretty interesting, that's very dorky, but it was like it was a school board race in Texas, where the members of the school board had said that we had overinterpreted the separation between church and state, and that they really wanted to put the church back into the state. And they took out all the climate change language from all of the school materials, all the curriculum materials. That completely flipped over. So we're getting climate change back.
Jigger, a lot of promises made about lowering energy prices. Are these promises going to get kept?
Well, I mean, we certainly have extraordinary companies in this room that can help keep those promises. So that part, I think, is great. I think the big thing that I got out of the election is that the Republican candidate for the governor of New Jersey basically was like, I'm going to reopen a whole bunch of fossil fuel plants and it's going to be amazing. And that clearly did not work. It was his like number one issue, and everyone basically said, we hate you. And so that's good. And I think that in Virginia, I think there were like 15 of the House of Delegates who ran specifically on climate.
Yeah.
Right? Not just like we're against data centers or we're against whatever. They were like, no, we actually want to honor all the laws that have been passed in Virginia to like scale up all of this American technology that Dominion has been holding us back from for years and years and years. And so like, and that also like beat in a big way. I mean, one of the candidates I was following, I think was in an R+6 race and won by 0.48%. I think they're 2 votes shy of a supermajority in the House of Delegates now. And so like, I just think it's important to recognize that this wasn't just a wave election. Climate was like on the ballot because the president has said he wants to make energy insecure in this country, right? Because he wants to like take the stuff that we deployed at 90%, right, last year and like hurt it as much as possible. And you had a bunch of candidates who said, I'm going to fight him tooth and nail on it.
I don't know that climate is on the ballot, though. I mean, I think it's really more about a bread and butter affordability issue, and that there's an opportunity to talk about clean solutions as part of that conversation. But it seems to me that the climate conversation is very, very removed from most of the policy debates.
I think people are starting to link them, though. People are starting to see that affordability is very much linked to inexpensive energy solutions, and that has a lot to do with climate.
Well, let's talk about the climate conversation and those sets of solutions through the lens of another story that is getting hotly debated and discussed as we head into the COP30 climate talks this month.
Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates publishing a memo that suggests adopting a different view and changing strategy towards addressing climate change. It is a rebuttal to what he calls, quote, the doomsday scenario.
Jigger's favorite billionaire, Bill Gates, is out with a new manifesto on how he thinks about climate impacts, philanthropy, climate tech investing, and here's how he described it in an interview on CNBC.
If you think climate is the only problem and it's apocalyptic, or if you think climate's not a problem at all, my memo will make no sense to you. You'll be like, oh no, it should all be climate, or you'll be like, why are you even still talking about this climate thing? Why do you invest billions of your money into these companies?
So if you haven't read the memo, it's a lengthy memo where Bill Gates is basically saying, yes, climate change is a big deal, but we're far too worried about these doomsday scenarios. And so we should be, given the gap in public health funding right now, we should be funding more public health initiatives that aren't necessarily directly related to climate. And instead, we should also invest in innovation so that we can drive down emissions in a decade or so once we've filled that gap and solved some of those problems around quality of life. And well, this landed in a way that seems very on brand for the media landscape of 2025.
Fraud alert, Bill Gates been pimping us out with climate change. And then all of a sudden he realizes, he had an epiphany, that climate change is a hoax.
This is the narrative flipping here. The man who told us the sky was falling, now says, the sun might stay up after all. I mean, I don't know.
And then President Trump comes out and says, Rob, if you have that clip.
It's actually a tweet.
Yeah, he says, we just won the war on climate change. Bill Gates has finally admitted that he was completely wrong on the issue. It took courage to do so, and for that, we are grateful. So, okay, this is what I'm thinking. I'm thinking
there's a reason why they're not releasing the Epstein files.
So the reactions broke down on pretty predictable partisan lines. Those on the right celebrated Gates' supposed reversal on climate change. That is not what it was, but that's how it was interpreted. There are even conspiracies going out. There were even conspiracies going on around about him changing his stance to avoid scrutiny over the Epstein files. Really wild stuff. And then the reaction on the left was that this was yet another billionaire bowing down to Trump and that he's moderating his stance in order to avoid scrutiny. But I think there's something else going on here, which is what I want to talk about. And it's this old idea that we have to make this trade-off, that somehow deployment of clean solutions is incompatible with economic growth and improving lives. So, Jigar, I know that you're chomping at the bit here. I want to start with you first, though, Catherine. What was your read, before we really get wild here, what was your read of the letter, and why do you think it hit such a nerve?
Yeah, so it's funny how people took him saying climate change will not lead to humanity's demise to saying climate change is a hoax. So he did not say that. That's not what he said. He just said, it is a serious issue. We have to deal with it. But the devil's in the details, of course. So he kind of said three big things. Climate change is serious. We've already made a ton of progress, and we need to keep backing zero-emission technologies. That's great. That sounds really great. We'll have to dig into what he's actually invested in and what we can really scale and get done. But he did say that. He said, we need to keep investing in this. The second thing is he said, you can't trade off funding from health and development to fund climate change. Because if you help on the development side and help people get healthier, they'll be more resilient to climate change. And that's kind of rich, because basically what he's saying is there's not a linkage. First of all, we've never asked to switch out any funds for health for climate change funds. They're all wrapped together in the SDGs, in COP. Everybody talks about all of these issues. And of course, they're inextricably linked, as you said. So health has a lot to do with climate change. And of course, if you're healthy, you'll be more resilient. At the same time, if you get storms, it will not help your health. And if you have more coal, it will not help your health. So, that's a little bit of a conundrum there. And then he said that human welfare has to be at the center of any climate policy. And he kind of looks at two main things. His two priorities are that he wants to drive what he calls a green premium to zero. So that's the difference between the dirty stuff and the clean stuff, which I don't exactly know what the premium thing means, other than you get something better when you get clean. There isn't really necessarily a cost differential, except for some of the solutions he's choosing. And then the other thing is he says we need to be vigorous about measuring impact and invest in things that have the most impact. And that's where we need to really hold him to account, because what are the things he's invested in? And let's really look at them. And a lot of them have had impact, and some of them will never have impact. I mean, that's like any investor, right? Where you have some that are winners and some that aren't. But a lot of the things that will have impact that we can do very, very quickly, he has not invested in. I think Jigar's well aware of that.
That's a great summary. So why are we talking about this? I debated whether or not to talk about this, but then I saw the extraordinary reaction. And this clearly sets a tone for the conversation around climate, both within the climate community and in the general public. And so I think it's worth, debating. Jigar, you have long publicly disagreed with Bill Gates on how he approaches this.
Hated.
I know that there are a lot of people in this room who may not have context around the feud. So remind us what he has long argued, why you have disagreed with him, why has that collided with your way of seeing the world?
First of all, I've been on this podcast with you since 2013. This is the only topic I've resented you for. I can't believe I have to spend 5 seconds talking about a person who is so uneducated to actually that it doesn't even warrant the conversation. So let's just put my
This is a guy who's invested billions of dollars of his own money into a major venture capital firm.
He's invested billions of dollars
real
into
role in the
private
ecosystem.
jets as well. I don't give a crap about what he's invested in. When you're worth $200 billion, you've invested $2 billion in lawn care services, I'm sure. It doesn't matter. My thing is that, look, first, Bill Gates started this whole journey with Bjorn Lomborg's TED Talk in 2007, right? That TED Talk was basically that the technologies we have today are not worth deploying at scale. We need to invest in more innovation because that's the future. He says that 4 times in this piece as well, right? So to be crystal clear, his point of view has not changed since 2007. He has said we need breakthrough technologies, and he infers that basically the technologies we have now are not worth deploying at scale, right? Fine. Then he sort of says, okay, in 2012, he says, solar's never going to amount to anything. It's a cute technology,
Yes,
right?
he called it cute.
And so you're like, first of all, why open your mouth at all, right? You don't know anything. And ultimately, like, who cares what you think? Like, it's one thing for you to open your mouth on vaccines and other things because, like, he actually has spent a tremendous amount of time on that. I think he actually works with real entrepreneurs. For all of you in this audience, how many of you are on Bill Gates's, like, speed dial? None of you, because he just talks to historians who also don't know anything about the technology commercialization trajectory of all these extraordinary people in the audience, right? So then you're like, what is the net impact of you doing that? It actually dries up capital for people who want to raise money for stuff in the area. Now, we move to 2015, right? The Paris Agreement. Why did the Paris Agreement pass? Because China, India, Brazil, and South Africa teamed up together and said, this is the largest wealth creation opportunity of our moment. And so they completely switched their decision from 2009 at the Copenhagen COP Summit, where they thought, we needed a $100 billion transition fund, right? Which Hillary Clinton offered up, right? So now, what does he do to celebrate that moment? He switches the entire press focus in the Paris Agreement to the mission innovation announcement that he made with Obama on stage. So no one realized that these 4 big companies were creating the electrostate, which we're now talking about, because he screwed up the entire media and comm strategy for the Paris Agreement, right? Now, let's keep going. Now he starts breaking...
Well, I should say, I should interrupt you, but I think one of the reasons why the Paris Agreement was successful was because countries saw that there was a set of solutions that they could rally around.
In fact, exactly the opposite. So what ended up happening was that China said, let's deploy solutions at scale, right? And they decided to invest in stuff that they knew was going to meet rights law, et cetera. Fine. Bill Gates used the opportunity in 2015 to create breakthrough. Invest in stuff that he knows, or he shouldn't have been so stupid to not know, that it was going to take 20 years for every one of his investments to be successful, whether it's TerraPower and Natrium, or whether it's like the cement companies or the steel companies or whatever. And then when he realized that he was so out of the money on his investments, he said, let me put together an entire policy team to figure out a way to get Western governments to put up way more money than they probably should to help accelerate the subsidization of his first-of-a-kind deployments so that he can enrich himself even more to like get his companies these projects. Now, instead, what we should have done was said, wow, we're only at 5% rooftop solar in this country, but Australia's at 35%. Why don't we figure out what the policies are to go from 5% to 35%, right? Or we have heat pumps. Why don't we get heat pumps to like be a much higher percentage? Or we have all these other solutions, weatherization programs, so we can help poor people who are like suffering from a polar vortex or a winter storm Uri in Texas. Did we do any of that stuff in the IRA? No, because Bill Gates is only interested in innovation and not deployment of technologies that are affordable at stage and at scale. And now what happened this week at the elections, everyone's like, why the hell didn't you guys focus on affordability, right? And so look, he could have just put this out and said, I don't have enough money to solve all the world's problems. I'm focusing on health. And I would have said, go with God. That's awesome. But he didn't. He then went on to write a bunch of stupid stuff that is not true. I'll give you one example of the stupidest thing that he wrote. He said the thing that matters the most is the Human Development Index, right? The HDI. And what is the #1 determinant of the Human Development Index? Access to electricity. Who is going to solve that problem? Us, solar and battery storage entrepreneurs that are in markets they're transforming the lives of family after family after family. Did that get a mention in any of his words? No, because he doesn't even recognize that we have cost-effective solutions. It is so ridiculous that I even have to talk about this.
Catherine, jump in the car. We're moving fast.
Yeah, I know. That said, since we are talking about this, I think there are kind of 2 big issues. One is, he has this huge pot of money A bunch of it now is going to vaccines, malaria prevention. That's great. That's awesome. He's filling in a gap that the U.S. has decided it was going to create needlessly. That's great. I'm happy that he's doing that. The other piece is his breakthrough energy piece. And that is, I read this really great Medium post by Michael Barnard, who said, like maybe 52% of those make sense from a climate perspective, and there may be 38% fail rate. That's like not that bad for an early stage investor to be able to have those kinds of successes and failure rates. But the issue is that, so he does invest in all different sectors with some things that are going to be really winning technologies. The issue is that they're not winning from the point of view of immediate scale and deployment. It's all about just like, let's just keep innovating. We do need to keep innovating, but we also need to scale. We need to put this stuff out into the world. And one of the key indicators here of not really wanting to completely put it out into the world is he fired all the breakthrough energy staff, all of their policy staff. He slashed their grant-making office altogether. And he's just decided, we're just going to keep going with the ones we've done, the fission, the fusion, that's like his favorite thing in the world. And there's some other things, and there's some other things that he's done really well with, and some of you all have benefited from that, and that's great. But the issue is, like, he has investments, he can invest in whatever he would like. But if he's really going to try to make a statement and be a thought leader in how do we solve for climate, how do we solve for development, how do we solve for human suffering, he needs to pick up some different technologies.
Yes, absolutely. I think great point. I will just say, Jigger, I think you texted me the letter and suggested we talk about this. So
I don't think I suggested we talk about this.
It kind of was accompanied with the WTF.
Yes. Well, it's an interesting point, Catherine. I think he did talk about wind and solar and battery storage, and he said that they were a success story when, a decade ago he was calling them cute. But and I believe he called them like an innovation success story, which is a little rich because, if you think about the 40 or 50 years of policy and market development that went into getting solar where it is. It's this long spectrum from invention and innovation to actually bankability and large-scale deployment. And the team at Breakthrough is doing some really interesting things. I mean, the Breakthrough Energy Ventures portfolio is super interesting, and they've invested in Form Energy and in Fervo. But when you actually look at like those two companies, for example, like, they are well past the innovation stage. And right now, what they need is like project financing, market access, support for their manufacturing build out, regulatory frameworks for Inform's case to ensure that long duration storage can play in the market. If you look at, Fervo, they're not stuck in the lab. They're out drilling wells, and none of this is theoretical anymore. And so they're now on the spectrum of deployment, and that's a totally different conversation than the one that he is having. And I think that's what is frustrating to me.
But he's trying to have a story about impact, but what he is doing is, like, he's not necessarily focusing on where that impact is and doubling down on how to make that impact real. So he goes through each sector, and I'll just give an example. So for buildings, he talks about heat pumps. He's like, heat pumps are great. They're cheap. We can scale them. Then he said, but, there's not enough workforce. And he just lets it sit out there. And he's invested in Dandelion. He's invested in other companies. But it's like, but wait a second. Then if you really want impact, then invest in workforce. We just heard that today. Everybody's saying, like, we need workforce. So maybe he could put a little money there too. He has a lot of it.
Mm-hmm. He doesn't care. Like, I just don't, like, this is why this is so frustrating. Like, he doesn't care. Like, I don't think people understand. And you could say he doesn't care for lots of reasons, but he doesn't care. Like, I just want to make sure that everyone understands this. The people who he's employed are extraordinary. The people at Breakthrough, all these people, they're amazing people. But I just want to make sure that we have this conversation in a real way if we're forced to talk about it. Like, Form Energy, their problem broadly is that the markets do not value long duration energy storage.
Right.
He refuses to spend a single dollar to fix that. Right? When you think about all these extraordinary people here who want to sell to electric utilities is where dreams go to die, like, he doesn't fix that. there's not a single electric utility company or EIP or anyone else that is actually making Duke Energy or National Grid deploy stuff faster. National Grid probably has one of the most extraordinary venture capital arms of any utility company I know of that never deploys the technologies they invest in, right? And so but he doesn't want to fix that. He's not fixing the underlying premise of the cement industry to get them to buy clean green cement faster. All of those companies have failed to license their technologies to the existing cement industry, which is where their business models went. He hasn't convinced Nucor to go whole hog into the next generation of direct reduced iron production, right? Why? Because he doesn't care. For him, technology itself is the end point. That once you invest in something that is so freaking amazing that he's going to go on Fareed Zakaria, and Fareed Zakaria is going to be like, I love you, Bill Gates. And then everyone is going to say, I'm going to deploy the technology the next day. And this sector doesn't work that way. Everything is a struggle. You have to go into Kenya. You have to get the government to care about figuring out the 700 million people in the continent that are in extreme electricity poverty, right? When people use mobile phones to try to make more money for their small agriculture farms, right? Someone has to figure out how to put the data onto that mobile phone and do all that stuff. He doesn't care. As long as someone has invented something over here, he doesn't care about the deployment over here. That's just not the way his brain is wired. And I'm fine with it. People have all sorts of flaws, right? But do not put it in my face through Gates notes. You have 70 people around you that are brilliant. Can't one of them stop you from hitting send?
Catherine, any parting thoughts as someone who has been where the rubber meets the road on actual policy for deployment?
Oh, yeah. We need policy for deployment, for sure. That's part of what you need to invest in is the policy piece. And a lot of this is just doing a million small actions that add up. And as Jigger said, getting the phones into the right people's hands so that they know when their crops need to be watered, all of those things, which a lot of you all are doing now. It's the small actions that add up to impact. And he is very much stuck in the I'm going to keep doing, investing in the big stuff. For a lot of that is about things that are going to take forever. And you can say, I just want to invest in the stuff that takes forever, but then don't pretend that you want to have your near-term impact.
One last thing.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think we've exhausted Bill.
No, just one last thing, because I just think it's important. This particular version of Gates's message also ding solar and wind. It says in there that solar and wind just can't meet this moment of load growth. It's right there. Now, if you look at the load growth that we've had globally since the first half of this year, right? We've grew roughly 369 terawatt hours of electricity sales globally. The solar and wind industry added 403 gigawatt hours worth of total new electricity production since the beginning of the year. And nuclear added another 33 terawatt hours, right? And so we are now ahead of schedule. For the first time in my lifetime, we are meeting 100% of all global electricity load growth with clean energy sources, right? But that's not in his damn piece.
Open Circuit is brought to you by Natural Power. For nearly 2 decades, Natural Power has delivered expert independent engineering and consulting services for renewables projects across the U.S. and beyond. Success in project transactions requires an independent engineer who's laser-focused on timelines, understands the nuances of risk, and collaborates seamlessly to develop solutions tailored to your needs. Natural Power excels at working within tight time constraints while ensuring diligence never takes a back seat. With deep expertise in wind, solar, and battery storage, Natural Power delivers top-tier support in independent engineering, technical due diligence, energy estimation, and developer support. Accepted by major financiers, their flexible approach ensures projects are built on a strong foundation. Powered by expertise, driven by sustainability, that is Natural Power. Find out more at naturalpower.com or click the link in the show notes.
Last year alone, the U.S. saw $27 billion disasters. 27. Utilities are under pressure from every direction. Regulators, investors, insurers, and customers to step up and get serious about resilience. It is one of the most important macro trends shaping the grid. That's why we're bringing together top experts for the first ever Power Resilience Forum, taking place January 21st to 23rd in Houston. The event, hosted by Latitude Media and the Ad Hoc Group, is convening leaders from Centerpoint, EPRI, Edison International, Xcel Energy, and more, who will share real strategies and forge the partnerships that will define the next playbook for resilience. Register now at resilience-forum.com.
All right, so we talked about how difficult and complicated it truly is. Now let's turn to those difficulties and the new normal for climate tech capital and climate tech startups. So even in a very chaotic year, tailwinds for the sector seem to be picking up again. Venture capital's thawing out a bit. Public markets have bounced back. There's an enormous amount of infrastructure capital right now pouring into clean energy, or some of it sitting on the sidelines, kind of trying to figure out how to pour it in. I was recently talking to Patrick Maloney, who's the founder and CEO of the venture firm CIV, and he was describing this super cycle that we're in. And I want to play a clip from a recent interview he did with the Wall Street Journal on how he describes this moment.
But what's fundamentally changed is, if you look at the 20 prior years, we were in effectively a low demand, low volatility environment in energy markets. And then three things changed. The first, of course, just being compute and the voracious energy needs behind, powering this transition to an AI and compute-driven economy. And then we overlaid on top of that, of course, we're now moving towards, reshoring and reindustrialization, 30 years of, a globalization policy now going the opposite direction, which is now forcing us to bring back manufacturing and build domestic supply chains and domestic production capacity, all of which requires a voracious amount of power.
So I think that's a great description of a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about over the last 9 months. And we've got this major capital spending boom on AI, add in energy security, supply chain reshoring, a dash of lower interest rates, and it's suddenly like a different landscape for investors. So are we settling into a new normal for climate tech? And what does that mean for the kind of startups in the room with us? Jigger, what do you make of Patrick's characterization? Do you agree, and is it opening up new sources of capital that didn't exist previously?
Well, today we are just unequivocally the dominant source of how you solve problems in this country, right? 90% of everything that's been turned on in the country this year has been clean, right? And so if you were to say, who are the smartest people in the entire country? They're working in solar and battery storage. If you ask them, what capital sources do they have access to? Unlimited capital sources, yes, because they're the smartest people in our country, right? So whether you're doing, family offices, right? So for instance, Tanguy Serra, right, over at Goodfinch, right, bought up all of the assets from SunPower and then now from Sonova. Those are all billionaire family office money that went into buying all that stuff. So that's new money, right? When you think about where things are headed in terms of SPACs, right? We've had tons of climate SPACs this year, right? And so the stock market is on a tear for climate technology, right? So then that's all new money, right? And so a lot of folks are oh, I might give you money because I think I can immediately SPAC you, right? There are folks who are starting to merge with old world companies, right? So there are companies that, would normally trade for 2 times earnings because they're a 70-year-old who is retiring from the company he's running, and the only person who wants to buy it right now is an SBA bro that wants to borrow money from the SBA and buy this company. Well, now there are climate tech companies who are I'm going to merge with your company, and actually I'll run your company because I have this new cement company and I'm going to buy your cement company and I'm going to merge the two together. So you're seeing a bunch of deals that look like that. And so what's happened is that our industry is no longer climate, it's just infrastructure, right? And so all of the business models that people have been using for infrastructure are the things now that people are using, those tools, right? Family offices, all of that stuff is now being used for our sector. And it's weird because for a lot of the people at Greentown Labs or other places, right, they've largely been using venture capital or growth capital or other things. So now they have to start diversifying all the different, pots of money and start characterizing it because they haven't been introducing their companies to those pots of money.
I think there's a lot of corporate investors as well in this ecosystem.
Well, but this is not corporate. This is largely family family office money. So think about the people who own your local strip mall and, the local, commercial office building in Boston.
Are strip mall owners your clients in Washington, Catherine?
But, they're members of Common Charge. That I started.
So tell me about that. So anyway, I kind of want to frame the policy piece too. So that's a really good, helpful understanding of the investment piece. We're 10 months into the Trump administration. How have you found the companies that you're working with have found their footing and this macro super cycle that we're talking about here? Do you feel like that's going to outweigh some of this federal policy chaos?
It's really interesting because the way we think about policy, the way I think about it is, and it's partly because I came out of the utilities sector where innovation goes to die, where, there are a ton of people who create amazing widgets and they're like, every utility is going to buy this. It's amazing. And I'm like, no utility is going to buy that, no matter how amazing it is. And so I think of what is the technology? Does it work? What are the markets? What does your market look like? What's your addressable market? Who are your competitors? How are you going to break in? And then what are the policy levers that you can push to remove barriers or to enable you to go faster? So when the Trump administration came in, they all of a sudden started taking a hatchet to the policy levers. And the folks that had not figured out their market strategy and their technology, they had just skipped to policy, were a little bit at a loss. So we've seen a lot of folks backing away from policy. I think that's a mistake. I think there are a lot of different ways to approach policy. And it's crucial because for so many companies, if you're doing business in the market that is electric and has anything to do with the utility, every single decision is made by the stroke of a pen of a regulator, and you better be engaged in policy or you are not going to have a market. So what I've seen over time is, there are companies, I think they're not the companies that are going to succeed. The ones that are not investing in thinking through policy and doing policy are not going to be successful because they won't have that set up for that. But I think what is happening is people are starting to say, all right, well, maybe my federal tax credit's going to go away. That is a reasonable assumption. So let's figure out what on the state side we need to do. So we do a lot of thinking about that. I would also say don't give up on the federal side because you just saw on Tuesday, the elections, all about affordability. They don't have any answers right now. They've decided they're going to crush anything that is affordable. And let's just cut off all the options that we have that are affordable. And they're going to need answers. And I think some of the answers are going to be virtual power plants, all the distributed side, customers becoming more engaged, which is why Common Charge kind of got started to talk about affordability and reliability. And I think what you're going to see is that there are percolating right now a lot of people talking about policies that deal with affordability, and it's all about clean energy. That's what it is.
Yeah. Can you just remind people what Common Charge is in case some people don't know?
Common Charge is a 501c3 that started, it kicked off Labor Day, and we did hire an executive director, but we're not announcing until next week, so I can't say anything about that. Super excited. But it's a group that combines for-profits and nonprofits, and regular customers, just people on the street are joining to be part of this, which is really almost like a movement to make sure that we have affordable, reliable power. And it's going to serve as kind of a hub, like an air traffic controller, assuming the air traffic controllers are getting paid, that will then kind of make sure that all of us have capacity in the states to fight the fights we need to do. Right.
So, Jigger, let's turn back to the investment piece. Catherine talked about the gaps and the changing engagement in policy. Tell me about the gaps for startups when they think about exits. This is your new firm Multiplier. This is what you're thinking about, and you're working with companies to help strategically plan out their exits and investment in the lead up to those exits. You've said that early stage companies, they need to stop waiting for these unicorn exits and start thinking like infrastructure builders. So what does that look like right now?
So in general, I think that most of our funding models have been borrowed from the tech industry, but we don't have the gross margins and the scale, right? You can't just download an app on your phone and then suddenly sell a SaaS model and have millions of people use it. Even in our SaaS model, there's 350 people that want to download your software. And so, so part of what we've realized is for a lot of these companies, once you hit product market fit and you have 2 happy customers, there's someone that's willing to buy your company. So you just sell your company company for like $50 million and make a lot of money because you've only raised $6 million, right? But for a lot of these folks, they've been told, no, keep raising hundreds of millions of dollars, have them as 1x preferences ahead of you, then sell your company for $1 billion. Oh, you made nothing off of that sale because you raised too much money? And so that dynamic is a lot of what we're fixing, right? Is that a lot of companies just need to think about every funding round is a funding round where they might want to exit.
Yeah, it makes me think that back when you were in the Department of Energy and we did the Inflation Reduction Act, God rest its soul, that it was very much about giving a lot of funding to a lot of companies. And in some ways, that really distorted the market. That really made people skip steps. It made some people winners and some people not. And I think that even though it was really good at buying down risk for utilities, which was in a lot of ways the point, you want to give them a permission structure to actually put in new technologies where they didn't have it before. I think not having all of that funding makes you be much more creative about your financing sources and your bottom line and how you're actually the fundamentals of your company and how you're going to function.
So to move along, a final question on this. It's pretty clear that this load growth scenario is bringing a lot of technologies at the margins into the center of the conversation. I have a question about what you think will define and how will this influence the next wave of climate tech growth. So if we think about the massive build out of data centers, does that provide a demand signal for clean steel, for CCS? Efficient chip design, right? I think you could make the case that wild new innovations in chips are a sort of a climate tech innovation of sorts or an energy innovation of sorts. Do you see sort of a class of technologies getting a unique opportunity in this moment?
Yeah, but I think the other side of it's also true, right? Which is that if you don't see a lot of revenue contracts in this moment, then it just didn't work, right? If you can't succeed in this moment, you can't succeed, right? And so take a hint, right? And so that's what I'm saying. People are desperate for solutions, right? They are desperate for solutions, and they're willing to pay. Think about what Cat just announced, right? Cat just announced they own this company, right? Solar turbines. I don't know why that's called solar, but whatever. That makes these up to 30 megawatt, up to 30 megawatt generators, right? It's $140 a megawatt hour to produce power out of those turbines, right? They're not cheap, particularly in this moment. They're increasing production by 2.5x. If you can't compete against Cat solar turbines, right, then what are you doing? Why are you here, right? And so that's it, right? So if you make it through this gauntlet over the next 2 or 3 years and you get a bunch of revenue and then you can exit, great. If you can't, I don't think this electricity super cycle, is coming again, right? This is your moment, this 5 years.
Yeah, definitely. I think there are a bunch of different places where they're going to be needing this exact scaling. One is transmission technologies, all kinds of things to squeeze every electron out of every wire. Another piece is hydropower, which we have 90,000 dams, 3% of which have power houses on them. Let's try for some infrastructure plays with hydro where you can make it really efficient. Let's look at geothermal anywhere, whether it's with district heating or otherwise. Let's look at technologies that work, that we know work, that are infrastructure plays, and let's go for it. Because that's what the corporates and the data centers are willing to invest in those because they need it. And also, of course, distributed energy, which is, I will just say, forever.
Tigger's going to invest whatever Bill Gates invests in.
Whatever he doesn't invest in.
Yeah, right.
Short it.
All right, so we've got to wrap up here, and I want to kind of close with a thought exercise. So we are here in Somerville, Massachusetts. We're just a few miles away from where the American Revolution began. Next year, of course, marks the 250th anniversary. I will say, actually, an interesting fact that I tried to pitch Ken Burns on in his new documentary. My wife went into labor at the site of the shot heard round the world, and so that'll always be a special place for us. But
wow.
Anyway, in those 250 years, we got the steam engine, electricity, the light bulb, the modern factory, the railways, the telegraph, the telephone, the jet engine, the electronics, nuclear power, the computer, the internet, and now artificial intelligence. And every one of those technologies has just dramatically reshaped the world in their own way. And today we're, surrounded by people trying to build the next set. So, a little thought exercise before we close. Jumping forward 250 years, what will people in 2275 remember as the defining breakthroughs of this moment? Catherine?
Yeah, this is interesting because we're here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which prides itself on all this 250 stuff. Well, I'm from the Commonwealth of Virginia, which also has a lot of the founding fathers who had mothers. And I was thinking about this because I live very close to Montpelier, which is James Madison's home, and there's a little statue. I would say little. There was a life-size statue of James Madison and Dolly Madison, and they're like the size of sixth graders. And so one of the things that I wonder about 250 years is, are we going to be a lot bigger? We've already gotten a lot bigger. It's going to be a whole lot bigger. But I think about what are people going to look at, and I think AI is, like what happened with AI. My hope is that in 250 years, we have like a 3-day work week, and everybody is much more focused on their family and their community and their friends and doing other productive activities than being in an office as a result of AI.
Yeah, I think it's obvious that I was probably going to choose AI as well. We talk a lot about the power sector. So yes, I think it'll be sort of fundamental to how we think about grid orchestration and the development of new technologies. But I'm really interested, and I think we will be remembered by the acceleration of the age of synthetic biology, the synthetic era. So instead of, extracting to produce materials, we will use synthetic biology to create those materials, whether it be, new sources of building materials or a variety of chemicals or whatever it is. And I think that the AI's acceleration of science to continue to iterate and discover new types of materials will be really foundational to the built environment around us. And I think that will be a pretty fundamental shift. I find myself, I'm pretty skeptical about the sort of the AGI claims and whatever the tech companies are getting people excited about. But I really have talked to a lot of people about how it can speed up the discovery process in science and how excited people are by that and just how many billions of hours that you can save. And so I think that the application of that in biology is really exciting to me. Jigger, what about you?
So if we're still alive, because AI hasn't killed us all, then I would suggest 2 more pedestrian things. One is that we'll have gotten rid of all transmission lines. I think all power will be beamed. So I don't think you'll actually have any wires.
So you believe it? When do you think that
I think we've already invented it, and my sense is that it'll be fully scaled up within 250 years. And then the second thing is that all energy that we don't need to produce just off our rooftop or whatever, I think will be produced on the moon, and then we'll beam it down.
You're a beam guy.
Beam me up.
Google's experimenting with orbiting data center concepts now. So
just put them on the moon.
I have some people I'd like to send to Mars, actually.
I didn't know the moon was so large. I guess it's one of the largest. It's way bigger than Pluto. It's half the size of or half the diameter, of Mars.
Well, if any of these things happen, you will hear about it from our AI doppelgangers in 2275 on Open Circuit. That's going to do it for the show. Thank you very much, Greentown Labs. And that's going to do it for the show. That was our live episode recorded this week from Greentown Labs. Thank you so much to Greentown for having us. Open Circuit is produced by Latitude Media. The show is hosted by me. Catherine Hamilton and Jigger Shaw are my lovely co-hosts. Sean Marquand is our technical director, and he wrote our theme song. If you want to support the show, go to Apple or Spotify and give us a rating and review. Thank you so much for doing that, and pass a link to anyone who you think would benefit from this show. And of course, subscribe to Latitude Media for more in-depth industry coverage. We'll catch you next time.